This is our moment. This is our chance. This is our opportunity to recapture our dynasty like never before.
And now, back to Quinn and Rose.
Welcome back to the show. Joining us this morning is founder and former president of Greenpeace. He's currently a policy advisor on climate and energy at the Heartland Institute. Also, you can check out the website, echosense.me. Please welcome to the show, Patrick Moore. How are you, Patrick?
I'm very well, thanks, Rose.
Thanks for coming on today. My goodness, sir, you have caused quite the firestorm. You were on Fox News the other day. You talked a lot about the Green New Deal, and I think it was on Tucker Carlson that I saw you, and you were making the case that this deal that's been proposed by the Democrats, specifically Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, would be a disaster for all of mankind. Do you still stand by that?
Well, absolutely, Rose. I mean, fossil fuels, you've got coal, oil, which is responsible for nearly all our transportation, and natural gas, which is being more and more used for our electricity. And this amounts to nearly 85% of the world's energy supply. And that's the same in the United States, where this Green New Deal is being proposed. And I would ask, will the United States eliminate 85% of its absolutely critical energy supply if no one else in the world follows suit? That's the first question.
Oh, good point.
It's like AOC is like in a bubble in Manhattan somewhere and does not realize that there is a larger world out there where people are beginning to come up in their standard of living, and even getting a scooter runs on gasoline instead of having to use a bicycle every day. And here she is proposing that we basically end human civilization and the energy supply which has made it possible. Our wealth, our health, and our lifetime existence, our longevity, all depend on these fossil fuels. And to eliminate them would result in fact, the death of a majority of the human population if they were just taken out from under us today.
No, that's
she's saying 10 years. That is, we don't have anything to replace these fossil fuels in 10 years. Maybe if she said 200 years, that would make a little bit more sense, but not 10 years.
Well, that's interesting. Now, one of the things I want to ask you about that comment you just made, but I want to make a comment myself, because the fossil fuel energy production, that's one of our cheapest sources of energy. And it's one of the reasons they say that our country has been able to be the leader in terms of carbon emissions reduction. So I'm baffled by that, certainly. But you say that it would eliminate mankind. Can you tell us why? I mean, because a lot of us don't understand as much as you do about these kind of things. And I'd love to understand why you make that statement.
Well, of all the things we need in this world, first we need air to breathe. Second, we need water and liquids to drink. And third, we need food. And fourth, we need energy. One of the reasons we need the energy is to produce the food. There's these things called tractors, and there are these people called farmers who grow all our food. And how do you think we would get the food into the center of all our huge cities if it were not for trucks, which also seem to require energy? So what would happen if we cut out the fossil fuels from our energy mix in a short period of time, like is being proposed, is agricultural production would collapse around the world,
oh my gosh,
especially in the industrial countries. And food would not get to the center of the cities. It would be hijacked along the way because it would be in short supply, and people would begin to starve from the city centers outward.
You know, this is frightening, and I can't believe that someone hasn't. Do you believe she hasn't really thought this through? Ocasio-Cortez, I know you tweeted about her, and you said you had over 3 million impressions on Twitter afterwards. But, I mean, has she really not thought this through? I mean, she can't be that stupid, can she?
It's not her that's doing this anyways. It's an organization called the Sunrise Movement.
Oh, interesting.
And from what I can see, they are a bunch of young kids screaming very loud. And it reminds me of Occupy warmed over.
Oh.
These people have not thought this through. They are a bunch of what you could, if you were generous, you would call them idealists. But this is a very dangerous thing that they are proposing, and it appeals to people, especially people who live in cities and do not have an understanding of where everything they need every day of their lives comes from. It comes from mining minerals. It comes from drilling for oil and gas. It comes from cutting trees. It comes from growing food and plowing fields and planting seeds and the whole agricultural system that feeds us every day. People think food comes from the supermarket. And so we have a population which is largely urban today that does not understand the basis of their lives.
You know, I have to. When you talk about the trees, I mean, I guess that would be one source of energy if they had their way. How long would you can't? How many trees would we have left? I mean, I thought that was the whole idea. We want to, maintain what we have and how important trees are to the environment, and it's baffling to me.
One of the reasons we have so many trees is because we discovered and began to use fossil fuels. Europe ran out of trees about 250 years ago,
wow.
And that was the reason that silviculture was invented. Silviculture, or tree farming, the growing of trees in the same way that we grow food. Up until then, there were plenty of trees. But now there are going on 8 billion people in this world, and if we eliminated fossil fuels today, there wouldn't be a tree left on this planet within a few years, because they would all be burned for cooking and heating our homes. And that's just a fact. I mean, we cannot live in the climates we live in north of the tropics and south of the tropics in the other hemisphere. We can't live there without heat or clothing or shelter. And so we have to heat our shelters. And this would require energy. And the way we do it now is either with electricity, most of which is generated with fossil fuels, or with fossil fuels directly, such as natural gas. And I think it's time that the general population got a better education about where everything they use every day comes from and how critical it is to maintain the supply of energy in this society in order to actually survive.
Well, that's what you're doing right now, is you are educating. You've been so outspoken of late and of course, retweeted and in some cases criticized, but that's okay because that still brings the topic to light, and we need that. We have so many young people who don't understand all of this, although I have to say, I was watching a period piece on Amazon Prime the other day. And I said to someone that was with me, my God, could you imagine living that way? And then it occurred to me, that is precisely the way we would begin to live again. What we've evolved from, what we'd be going back to if they had their way.
Yes, everybody should watch the Viking Series. We're watching it now, and it's fascinating. But it really gives you an idea of what it was like to live in those days. Life was short and brutish in those days, and people fought a lot for food and land, and they did not have a long life. The average age up until about 1900 was something like 35 years.
Yes.
And we just don't realize how lucky we are to have this existence we have today.
I thought it was interesting, too, that some of the unions came out and criticized the Green New Deal, saying that this would cause widespread poverty. People wouldn't be able to put food on the table for their families. I was really kind of surprised to see them react that way, but I was pleased as well. And they're right, according to everything you've said as well. I mean, and then, the Green New Deal was promising everyone that the government is going to provide healthy food to every single American. I don't know how they're going to do that, but that's what they're promising. Plus, ask any kid that had to go through the whole Michelle Obama's lunch plan, and they didn't eat. They were starving by the time they got home. But they want to ban meat, of course. And already we saw that de Blasio has got Meatless Mondays now in an effort to, how do you feel about that? Meatless Mondays to save the planet.
100% virtue signaling. It means nothing.
That's good. Yeah.
Okay, why doesn't he just come right out and say we should kill all the cows? Because if people didn't eat meat, there wouldn't be any cows. It's not just meat; it's butter and cheese
Yes,
and yogurt.
that's exactly right.
These are important parts of our diet, and it isn't just steak; it's also hamburger and food which people who don't have a large income can afford.
Exactly.
That has lots of protein in it and has the fats in it that you need for energy. Even nutrition is being misunderstood so completely. It's like a bunch of kids wrote this Green New Deal. I'm not kidding.
Oh my God!
Let's get people around a table and talk about this, because one of the things that's going on now is these climate change crisis people will not come into the open and debate these issues. They say the science is settled and that we are deniers and that skepticism should not be allowed. Skepticism is the hallmark of an inquiring mind and was one of the main bases of science, is that you should always question what people say is true, because they're not always right. And so that's how science has become sharpened and honed over the centuries, is by constant questioning of what people say they know. They don't always know it. And Mark Twain said it very clearly. It's not what you know that will hurt you. It's what you think you know that just ain't so.
Oh, yes.
And
yep.
That was a very wise saying, because a lot of people think they know when they don't. And as an individual, we should always be questioning what we think we know, because sometimes we think we know it just because someone has said it on the radio or on TV. And we've got to make sure that we keep our minds sharp in this day and age, because people are trying to sell the Brooklyn Bridge to us every 5 minutes over the media and over the internet.
That's a good point. But when you suggest that Ocasio-Cortez is much influenced by the Sunrise Movement, let me ask you about this. Do they not understand then, the young people within this movement, how devastating this would be to the planet? I mean, really, to what end are they pushing these ideas and these kind of deals, Green New Deal type thing?
Well, you know what? The sad part of it is some very high-level established people are supporting this, like the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, for example, in New York. I'm a Canadian, and I've been involved in international environmental work all my life. And one of the things that is really galling is, as a Canadian, I'm watching while U.S. foundations, huge, wealthy foundations, many of whom are based originally on oil money, like Rockefeller's and Pew, for example, are basically sending hundreds of millions of dollars into Canada to destroy our energy industry there, what they call the tar sands, which is in fact our oil sands in Alberta, which is one of the most environmentally well-operated and unionized operations in the world for producing the oil we need, and they are working to destroy it. And they have put 100,000 people out of work in that province of Alberta in the last few years, because they're taking control of Canada's political apparatus. I mean, this is a global movement against energy, and it is extremely dangerous and must be stopped.
Oh my God. It's so frightening. I talk to young people, millennials, and, I get a mixed reaction on this subject. A lot of them, they care about the environment. We all do. I mean, otherwise you wouldn't be involved with EcoSense.me and the Heartland Institute. You care as well. But we want to do it in a reasonable way. We want to do it carefully and in a way that makes sense. And I think that I find a lot of young people have told me that this Green New Deal scares them. So thank God there's some out there that recognize the danger in all of this. I find it interesting that Mitch McConnell has said that he is definitely going to get the Democrats on the record very soon on the Green New Deal. But as I'm sure you've noted, they are rather reluctant to do so, to come forward with it, because I think they know that this is insane.
They must know it's insane if they have a brain in their head. But the thing is, politicians thrive on fear and fear stories, because basically what's happening is politicians are paying scientists to produce scare stories. Almost all of this climate crisis stuff is coming from government-funded studies, so-called studies, by scientists who are part of this basically huge a convergence of interests among elites, including the media, the green movement, Hollywood, the scientists who are willing to take this money in order to produce the scare stories, and then the politicians can say to the voters, vote for me and I will save your children from this terrible crisis of the climate change. When in fact, there is nothing happening in the climate today anywhere in the world that is anywhere near out of ordinary with the weather and climate over the last 10,000 years during this interglacial period that we are in now. Nothing is out of the ordinary. There are extreme weather events, yes, there always have been and there always will be. But in fact, there is no trend towards more extreme weather events, and even the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change states that very clearly. But the hysteria continues and must end. It must end because we have to get back on a saner path towards the future.
Wow, I like you, Patrick Moore, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate that you're willing to speak the truth despite any criticism or resistance out there, and we really do appreciate where you've come from. I have like 1 minute. I want to ask you real quick. Have your views on saving the environment, if you will, changed or evolved much over the last, decade, would you say?
Certainly not over the last decade, and even not since the beginning when we all helped start Greenpeace back in the early 70s. There's only one thing we did then that I regret, and that was being so worried about nuclear energy, because we were so worried about nuclear war back then, and our first campaign was to stop nuclear testing. So I do support nuclear energy very strongly, and one of the craziest things is most of these people who are worried about climate change from fossil fuels are also opposed to nuclear energy and hydroelectric energy, which is even renewable.
Wow.
And yet they're opposed to both. They're opposed to both of those real alternatives to fossil fuels for electricity production, at least. And this is the irrationality of this movement. They're against actually 98% of all the energy that's being used to support human civilization in the world today, not just in the United States, but in the world. And we've got to get these numbers in front of people so they can look at them and make intelligent decisions about what they believe is right for the future.
Patrick Moore, thank you so much for giving us such good information this morning. His Twitter is at EchoSenseNow, and his website is echosense.me. Thank you so much for what you're doing. Keep up the good work. God bless.
Great to be with you, Rose.
It's great to have you. I hope you'll come back.
Back anytime, Rose.
Oh, I'm glad.
You're a very good interviewer. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, sweetie.
You're able. Well, I know you're. I know you're a very high level interviewer, and I appreciate that because you know how to draw a person out and get them to elaborate.
Oh, that's the highest compliment. It really is. And it's because I'm so curious about everything. So I think that helps. But God bless you. That is very kind. Thank you. I will hold those words dear.
You're most welcome, and have a wonderful day.
You too, hon. Bye-bye now.